Welcome back, everyone, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. So I promised before the break that we were going to do the listener Q&A, but a little bit of a twist on the listener Q&A. And very excited to welcome my colleague, Steve Fernandez-Brennan, who also happens to be a former AO at Occidental, at Marquette, at Loyola University Chicago, and Regis. So he's bringing a huge wealth of knowledge to the pod today. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks so much, Beth. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Very excited to have you join. And to our listeners who might have been expecting a segment on colleges for students on the autism spectrum, my colleague who was meant to join me is not feeling well, so we are going to postpone that. Steve is stepping in literally at the last minute to fill in for her. So we're going to have some fun with this, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, so we get a lot of listener questions, very legitimate questions, and we're going to look and talk about those and talk about the answers today. But there was some things that struck me about this particular batch of questions, and that was the whole kind of like blanket statement nature of what to do or not to do, and then also the panic that can set in when you're listening to what other people are doing or telling you that they're doing and things like that. So I thought we could kind of tackle that alongside the actual answers to some of these questions. So we got this question through Facebook from Joe, who asks, says he has a question on reporting AP scores. My son has taken 9 classes and presumably 9 AP classes and 9 exams. He has 4 5s,
Great.
3 4s,
Great.
and 2 3s.
Good.
So, right, which is great, right?
Yeah.
And I feel the need to throw out there that taking 9 AP classes and 9 AP exams is not necessarily a expectation for students. And just because Joe's child has done this doesn't mean, or Joe's son has done this, doesn't mean that your son or daughter need to do this. I'm just going to throw that out there. But Joe's actual question is, do we report the 3s on applications for top 50 schools? So Steve, what's your initial gut reaction to that?
My initial gut reaction is it depends, Beth, like so much of this, right? So
yes.
Generally speaking, we say that 4s and 5s, you want to report those. Those are great scores. You want to report those to every school. 3s, maybe not. I will say that the University of California system, you should report all scores, all AP scores, even if the student doesn't pass the AP exam, because they will look to see if there's a score, if the student has taken an AP course. Other colleges and universities don't do that. They don't say, hey, I see the student took AP US history. I don't see a score. Where is it? They're busy. They have hundreds of these to read. They're not digging through looking for missing information. They're just looking at the information in front of them. So always report 4s and 5s, report 3s. Definitely for the UCs. For other colleges and universities, maybe not. If you're applying for highly selective colleges and universities, the 3s are not going to help. And why submit information that doesn't put you in the best possible light?
And I think what I would further, yes, to everything you just said, and what I would further add to that is the piece of the question that kind of had me like, ugh, is the top 50, right? Top 50 where? Top 50 who? Who's saying what's top 50, what's not top 50? And I believe, you know, Joe, not to pick on you, but I think what you're probably talking about is top 50 for US News and World Report, which, you know, again, I'm just going to take a deep breath and remind everyone that this is a list compiled to sell advertising on a website, and it was created to sell magazines. This is nobody's idea of the cut and dried, these are the best schools. Much more important than saying just a blanket statement for anything, but also for like the top 50 is look at the list of schools your child is applying to. Do they accept 3s as credit? Will you get credit if you earn a 3? If so, report that 3. If not, then leave it off, right? And at the most selective level, I would agree with you. 3s are not helping. I see no need why you would need to report the 3s, but I would always report the 4s and 5s. So
I love how both of us took a deep breath when we talked about the top 50 in the rankings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
again, top 50 for who? I would, if our listeners take nothing away from this, I really, really wish you would all take away that like the US News and World Report is utterly useless, should not be. You should develop your own criteria for what's important in a college and then find the colleges that fit that criteria and rise to the top. Okay, next question. Should my son have taken the SAT or ACT in 10th grade? All his friends did, Steve. What do you think?
Comparison is the thief of joy,
It
right?
is. Oh my gosh, my husband and I were just talking about that yesterday.
Yeah. So, no. And some colleges, is it true, Beth? Do you remember that Carnegie Mellon doesn't accept 10th grade
Yes,
SAT or ACTs,
correct.
right?
Correct, yes.
And so, no, there's no need to take it in 10th grade. It doesn't matter what all your friends and neighbors are doing. I could guess based on this question, the geography is probably a couple of spots in the US, right? The Bay
Right.
Area, New York, New Jersey, tri-state area, where there's so much pressure around this. And I feel for families because the process is opaque. It's not transparent. And you hear, quote unquote, we heard that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And my neighbor's babysitter's cousin got into Brown because she took the SAT in 10th grade. No, that's not what happened.
Nope, yep.
And we conflate causality with correlation. There's all kinds of things going on baked into this question, right?
Yes, yes, totally.
But
also, we're behind, right?
we're
Like,
behind.
the big
Everyone else
fear
is ahead
being
of
behind.
us.
Yes,
Right?
yeah.
We're not in the right spot of this process. Every child is different. And at Bright Horizons College Coach, we always start with who's your child?
Yeah.
And what are their needs and what does their process look like? And based on that, for some students, is it appropriate to take the SAT in 10th grade? Maybe. I think that student would be an outlier.
Yeah,
I don't see
totally. Yeah.
I don't see any real benefit. Colleges don't give you points for doing things early. And so many times we collectively, and again, not to pick on this person, but we collectively push our students to do things before they're ready. And depending on their course content, it might be a terrible idea to take an SAT or ACT in 10th grade. And the student's not ready in terms of maturity. The student's not ready in terms of course selection. And it's just a bad idea.
Yeah.
And so, no.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Short answer is absolutely no, totally agree. I always tell families that the SAT and ACT are designed for second semester juniors. I don't know if all of your child's friends are athletes. That's sometimes you see athletes taking a little earlier because the coaches are going to be asking for it. But even then, that doesn't always go so well, because to your point, maybe they haven't had all the math that's going to be asked on those tests yet. So I work with very few students, and many of the students I work with are applying to the most selective schools. Very few of them take the SAT or the ACT before the second half of their junior year. And I'm having to rack my brain to think about any other than a couple of recruited athletes who took it in 10th grade, truthfully. So
yeah, same.
Yeah. All right, we have spoken. The answer is no. He should not have taken it. All right, this next question comes to us from Alexandra, who is hearing through the parent grapevine that it's good to continue with foreign language. My son will be in Spanish 4 as a junior. Can he stop taking it after that?
Oh, the world language question. So generally speaking, the gold standard is having 4 years of the 5 core core content areas, right? English, math, science, social studies, and in this case, Spanish, world language, whichever language other than English the student's taking. If a student has Spanish 4 and they're substituting something in senior year for that slot, they're doubling up on math, they're doubling up on science. My niece was in this exact situation. I told her she had to take Spanish every year. She got through Spanish 4 in 11th grade, and she said, please, can I not take Spanish 5? I don't want to take AP Spanish. That's the only course offered at my school. I'm going into STEM. All my target schools require 4 years of world language. Fine, great, okay?
Right.
There can be lots of reasons, but there's no one size fits all for this.
Right.
If a student is looking at a major where when they get to college, they need to take at least a year of world language. Stepping away from Spanish, can you do it? Yes, 4 years is appropriate. 4 years is great preparation for all colleges and universities. They want to see, 3 or 4 years of that world language. But it might be that if you take it as a senior and then you take that placement exam, Beth, that you don't get
Right.
to,
Don't get to. Yes.
don't get to, you won't need to take Spanish because you placed out of it. Whereas if you step away from Spanish as a senior, the reality is, unless you're in a space where you're speaking it all the time, you're going to lose it. And when you take that placement exam, you're either going to start over with French or Tagalog or some other language, right? You're going to need to take a different world language, or start over with your Spanish. So it's a really, really nuanced question.
Yeah, and I think that, again, we don't want to solely focus on the most selective schools because there are so many more out there. But at that level too, if you're looking to apply to an Ivy or a Stanford, the reality is you're going to be up against students who did stick with the foreign language all the way through senior year, took it at the highest level available at the high school. And some will even go farther than that. So, do you absolutely have to do it? No, you don't. But could it be beneficial depending on the colleges you're shooting for? Yes, it could be. So again, it depends, and there's no size fits all.
And the major too, right? If a student is engineering and they'll never have to get to take a world language again, then that's a little bit of a different conversation. If the student is looking at Georgetown or Occidental or a place that's really, focused in on international and they want international relations, absolutely take the 5th year Spanish.
Yes.
And so it's not just the most selective schools, but it's also, I'd love to know more and learn what the student's considering majoring in.
Exactly. And I think another point, does your student want to go abroad at some point while they're in college? Having just been, accompanied my husband on a business trip to Spain, I was actually pretty surprised by the level of where we were going and not a ton of English being spoken. We kind of become accustomed everywhere you go, everybody speaks English. Well, where I was shockingly drawing on that 1.5 years of Spanish that I took back in high school. French was my language, but I took a little bit of Spanish as well. And I needed it. And I was really happy that I had it. So, citizen of the world, future travel, study abroad, there's some other reasons to stick with it. But we don't have 2 hours, so we'll move on to the next one.
Exactly.
All right. This one is an interesting question that I'm not entirely, I think I know where it stems from, but not entirely clear. But it seems to come up a little bit more frequently lately. And that is, does applying in August improve my chances of admission?
That's interesting. And having done this for a while, it's interesting seeing the questions cycle through, right? This is nothing we got 5 years ago.
No,
never heard this question, right? And I think there's so much pressure and people are trying to move the calendars to simply, there's calendar creep here. Right. The answer, as always, Beth, is it depends.
Yes.
For colleges that do rolling admission, that is to say, first come, first serve admission, applying earlier within the admission window can increase your chances. And it's just a good thing to do, just to get that application out the door and to find out earlier in the process, yes, I've been accepted to University of Arizona. Great, takes the pressure off. I'm going to college somewhere, right? If that's a school that you're particularly excited about, as an example of a rolling admission. It's great to find that out. For colleges that do pool admission, that is to say they have a deadline of November 1st, say. Right. And they choose from the pool who they're taking. Whether you apply on October 30th or whether you apply on August 1st when the application opens is immaterial. Right. And so it depends on the school. And I think the other thing that is really important, and I know we have a lot of counselors who listen, school counselors who listen to the podcast, is that unless you're already back in school in August, your school counselor is almost definitely not going to be working with you in terms of the school's pieces are not going to land in August. And that is generally, by the way, fine, right? You could send in your part of the application if you feel really strongly that you want to get it in, and then the transcript and the school materials can follow after the fact.
For those of you who are not about to enter your senior year, I would suggest this is a conversation you have with your school counselor before the end of your junior year. You know, what is the school's timeline? What is the earliest that the school is going to be sending out their materials? Because just because the colleges may have said, oh, our application is open, doesn't mean that the schools are ready with their pieces. And by the way, that's fine. The colleges do understand this. I know that there is, and the names of the schools are not coming to mind right now, but there are a handful of schools out there where when you actually submit your application, like the date it comes in can impact your options for housing. This is very few colleges do this. They will tell you that they do it. So you can go and find that out. If they don't say they do it, then they're not doing it. I'm going to make a blanket statement and say, if the college is not telling you they're doing this, they're not doing this. But I believe even in that situation, your application, your pieces, the earlier they get in are what matter. When the school stuff comes in, it gets matched up with yours. The school does not need to hit that early deadline. And
The high school.
The high school, exactly. Sorry.
Right.
The high school does not need to meet that early deadline. So for those of you who are listening to this and about to fire off an email to your school counselor to say, I need to get my application in tomorrow, you need to be prepared that you can get your part in, but the school's pieces are going to come later. And you have to respect that the school has a process, and they have worked with thousands upon thousands of students who've gotten into college. And believe me, yours is not the unique situation. That I know this works for everybody, but for me, it needs to go in differently, right? I'm feeling for the school counselors out there right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think August is a little, I can think of no school where you must get your application in by August, quite honestly. I even like mid-September might be the earliest that I might have a student getting something in. But with rolling admissions in general, I find that so long as it's in by like mid-October, even by the end of November, you're probably fine. I don't know. You see anything differently, Steve?
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I do think as far as process management goes, just get it out the door.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. And do the best job that you can.
That's it too.
Right? You want to make sure that when you're pressing submit, you only get to submit your application once, and you can't recall it and say, oh, sorry, I wrote a new essay and it's better. Or I just realized that I sent you something that's kind of half-assed because I was so focused on getting it out the door in August. And now I wanted, here's my more thoughtful application, right? You got to balance it. So
that's it. Yep.
Anything else to add, Steve, before we wrap up our segment today?
Just folks, take a deep breath and don't worry about the neighbor's babysitter.
Yes.
Don't worry about what other people are doing. Just, it starts with your child. It starts with their process. And if you have questions, certainly reach out. I mean, that's why we're here. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to throw the caveat out there that as soon as I said, yes, I agree with you that Carnegie Mellon doesn't look at scores from 10th grade, I was like, wait, is it 10th or is it 9th? So we're just going to go on record as saying that it's 9th or 10th, not positive.
Perfect.
I will, we could post something after this segment. I'm going to go look it up, but I can't do that and talk to you at the same time. But I know that that Carnegie Mellon stands out as a school that doesn't take scores that are done too early. So,
correct. Right.
Anyway, all right.
Perfect.
Steve, thanks again for jumping in at the last minute. You're a trooper.
My pleasure.
And I appreciate it. All right. Thanks
Anytime,
again.
Beth.
All right. Sounds good. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the perks of on-campus jobs. So don't go away.